What's going on, guys, and welcome back to another video. As you can see from that first clip, I just finished filling the rear diff with some gear oil. I just used some Redline 75W90, and I also put fluids in the gearbox as well. What I'm using is this Redline lightweight shockproof, and combined with some Redline 75W90 for the gearbox as well. This is a recommended cocktail from Baderbuilt Racing. Josh Bader is a really talented tuner who tunes a lot of Subarus and builds a lot of Subarus. He's from Spokane, Washington. And he has come up with this little cocktail to help improve the lifespan of these gearboxes. So what he recommends is either a 50-50 split of the lightweight shockproof and 75W90, or 3 of the lightweight shockproof and 1 of the 75W90, which is what I did. If you're gonna daily the car more and you're not like abusing it, it's not like a high horsepower build, you don't need to do the 50-50 mixture. So I did the 3 and then the 1 of just the regular gear oil. Threw that in now just because I wanted to make sure that the transmission wasn't leaking fluid. It doesn't appear to be leaking anything, so I think we're good there. And I also didn't want to forget to do the rear diff, so I just knocked that out real quick. I'm getting really close to dropping the engine back in the engine bay. Before I work on that though, I want to show you guys some goodies that showed up that we are going to be putting on the car. So right here, have a beautiful exhaust from HKS. It's just a high power exhaust. It's nothing too fancy. Personally, I like the look of these exhausts. I like the bigger exit, and this exhaust, even though it's like this massive cannon out the back, it's pretty quiet for what it is. And I think because it has this resonator right here, I think they sound really good, and they are super affordable exhausts. So I really like that aspect as well. Also have some strut bars here, the front and rear. These are from Cusco. And so I'm really excited to throw those on as well. And then of course, we have the engine right here. And I am going to get this up on the engine hoist here shortly. I'm actually going to use the STI flywheel. I replaced the bearing with a brand new one, and just kind of like scuffed it up with a wire wheel, just to get some of the like surface rust off the thing. It's been sitting around for quite a while. And we have the clutch and pressure plate right there. Still in pretty good shape, I think. So pretty stoked to use that bad boy. And if I have any issues with it, I mean, it'll kind of suck because I'll have to pull the engine again, but I'm getting pretty good at pulling these things, so I'm really not that concerned about it. But I'm gonna try out the used STI clutch and flywheel and just see how well it still performs. If not, we can always go back to the WRX clutch and flywheel, which is basically brand new still. Flywheel is still on the back of the engine here. So you can actually use the WRX clutch and flywheel, but you have to keep them together. You can't like use the STI flywheel with the WRX clutch. It doesn't fit. The disc is a different size. Like the diameter of the actual clutch disc is different, and then the holes that you mount the pressure plate onto the flywheel are different, and so you kind of just have to use all of it together. I'm also going to be modifying this bracket right here. So I have the intercooler bracket, the standard WRX and STI bracket, but because my intercooler down there is actually off of a 2019 STI, they made them larger, and so it doesn't, the mount doesn't fit because the the mounting hole actually like sticks out this way further. But I realized that if I mount this onto this bracket, it fits perfectly into this hole. So I'm going to actually cut this bracket, I think right here, just cut all this extra stuff off, and then we can extend this mount. and we should be good. I'd been running it without it attached to this mount. I left this on here so that it kind of provided a little bit of integrity to it, because the intercooler kind of sat and rested on this, but it wasn't like bolted down. I don't like that. Obviously being at like 300 wheel isn't like a huge concern, but I don't know, it just doesn't make sense to have the intercooler like not mounted in 2 places. Well, I guess 3 places, because it's also mounted to the throttle body. But yeah, I just have been, it's been on my mind, and I knew that I needed to take care of that because it's just not the proper way to have it set up. Hopefully we can get to putting our downpipe on and our exhaust, because then we'll basically be ready to fill it with some oil and build some oil pressure and see if we can start it back up. I don't anticipate any issues with it starting back up, but you never know. All right, so I use just like a tiny bit, like a little dab of red Loctite on the flywheel bolts, just as peace of mind. I have heard stories of those like backing out under like vibration, so don't want that to happen. It'll be a little bit more of a pain to get them off later when I do want to like switch this bad boy out, but shouldn't be a big deal to get them off with a little bit of heat. So right here, this is a picture of the flywheel page in the FSM. And there's a specific sequence as to which you are supposed to adhere to when you're tightening the bolts. And it looks like the torque spec is 52.8 foot-pounds. So I'm gonna grab my torque wrench and we're gonna torque those down in that sequence. Centered. All right, so I just pulled the retaining pin out, or the slide pin, pulled the clutch fork out, pulled the throwout bearing out, cleaned it all up, re-greased the little legs here on the clutch fork, and greased up the nose there of the transmission as well as the slide pin, and she's gliding real nice now. So I put the bolt back in on the side of the pin, and it's time to throw the engine in. All right guys, so it is obviously a new day. The engine is now back in the car. I decided to do a lot of that off camera because I have shown that so many times on this channel. One thing to note though, is I did struggle with getting the engine to mate up with the transmission. I thought maybe it was something to do with the 6-speed being different. What I found out was that unfortunately the clutch disc for the STI under here, the splines on it, or where it mates to the splines in here, I don't know if they're called splines on this as well, they probably are, but the way it goes on the transmission is this. So like this side mounts to the input shaft on the transmission, and they're so chewed up, those splines, that I could not get it to slide onto the input shaft. After struggling with it for literally hours, I finally pulled it back out, pulled the pressure plate off, took the clutch out, and just tried to slide it over the splines on the input shaft, and I could not get it to actually go on. So then I tested the other clutch disc, the WX clutch disc, and it slid on perfectly fine. So unfortunately, I did have to take the STI flywheel off, use the WX flywheel, and clutch disc and pressure plate. It's not really that big of a deal. It would be nice to use the STI stuff, especially that flywheel, because it is different. But the clutch that I already had on this thing was a brand new OEM clutch and flywheel. So it should hold up for a while. And I mean, this thing's maybe pushing like 300 wheel. So the clutch can hold that kind of power just fine. What I have done so far is I've gone through and kind of buttoned up all the electrical like clips, plugs, all the coolant lines that I could hook up. I did go through and bleed all of the brakes, so we have some really good pedal pressure now. I'm having a lot of trouble with the bleeding the clutch. I did a bunch of different things. I actually took the slave cylinder off, pulled the rubber boot off and that front pin, and pushed the, there's like a piston in there. I pushed that piston all the way in, clamped it in place, and actually held it up here so that it was like the highest point, and then had my wife pump the clutch pedal, and we bled all of the air out. But unfortunately, it's still just super spongy and getting stuck to the floor. I did test the master cylinder to make sure that like fluid was in fact like being pushed out of it. And what I mean by that is I unhooked this hard line right here and put a bucket underneath it and pushed the pedal to the floor to see if fluid squirted out, and sure enough it did. The next thing that I'm going to try is I'm gonna just try to replace this master cylinder. I believe it is the original one that came on this car, so it's got about 230,000 miles on it. I did source a pretty cheap one for like 50 bucks on eBay that's used off an STI, so I don't know, maybe that's bad form. Maybe I should have just paid the $150 and got a brand new OEM one, but I just wanted to try this first, see if it solves the issue before I spend extra money. Because obviously if I bought a brand new OEM master cylinder and then it didn't work and it was something else, that would be a lot more money that I'm basically just like throwing away for no reason. So I kind of cheaped out and got a used one to test it and see if that is our issue. What I'm going to do now is I'm gonna cut that bracket so we can mount the intercooler. I'm gonna get that all buttoned up. I'm going to mount up the downpipe and the exhaust, and that way we can put some coolant in it, burp the coolant system, and just kind of let it idle for a bit. I also need to bleed the power steering again as well. So lots to do still, but making huge progress, and hopefully within the next several days, we'll be able to get this thing on the road and actually take it for its first test drive. Brand new OEM turbo gasket, downpipe gasket. So throw that on first, and then we will jump underneath the car and get that thing bolted up. All right, guys, so it's a new day out here in the shop. A couple of bonehead moves that I made. For one, you saw in that one clip, I completely forgot to tighten down my high pressure line on the power steering pump, and ATF just went spraying all over the engine bay. So that was nice. That took a long time to clean up. I had to spray a bunch of brake clean in there and just hit it with rags, and it was like endless. I'm sure it's still kind of gross down in there, but it is what it is. Also, had such a struggle bleeding the clutch on this thing. It was just spinning my wheels. I ruined a couple slave cylinders. See all the pieces over here. This is the aftermath of what went down. Yeah, the pedal would build up pressure and then it would seem like it was good, and so I would really push on it with my foot, and it blew the piston out of the front of both of these. And I couldn't for the life of me figure out why the hell that was happening. And when it does, it like ruins the seals on the piston. As you can see, these right here, they go around these pistons. And when they shoot out of the front of that thing, like a couple of them tore. So I was like, well, I can't use those anymore, obviously. Thankfully, I had a third one, and that one I did not ruin. Basically, what I figured out, I was spinning my wheels. I spent hours trying to bleed this thing. Could not figure out how I was doing it wrong. Tried a bunch of different methods, all to realize that I didn't actually engage the clutch fork after installing the engine to where it would, the throwout bearing would mate with the pressure plate. And by doing that, I wasn't getting the pedal, I wasn't getting back pressure from that plate to push the clutch pedal back out. So it just kept getting stuck to the floor even after the clutch was properly bled. So just remember, whenever you install an engine, an EJ like this, just be sure that as soon as you've mated the engine and the bell housing of the transmission, push that clutch fork back so it pivots out, and make sure that you hear that click, because then you know that it's in there. And I thought that I had done that because normally that's the first thing I do to check to see if I did it right. But apparently I just got caught up and didn't even think about it while I was trying to bleed that clutch. Once I did that, bled the clutch again, and it was perfect. I'm glad that's over. I actually have a much better understanding of the clutch now, which is good, but even still, like, could have saved a lot of time if I would have just like remembered to do it correctly from the get-go. We're back on track. I'm gonna start bleeding the coolant in this thing. I do need to get some gas in it first. Also gonna start burping the power steering as well. Once we do that, we're pretty good on this thing. And then I just need to wait for my wheel and tire setup to arrive so that we can throw those on here and adjust the alignment as well as the ride height. So I'm gonna get moving. Probably all I'm gonna get through in this video is just getting everything bled out and getting the power steering burped so that it's ready to go when we do get that stuff. So I'm just gonna jump back into doing that, and hopefully we can get all this sorted out and get it running solid. Little Dexron 3 ATF for our Steering reservoir. Let's not make a mess. Make sure we hear the pump kick on. Fuel pressure looks spot on. Getting lots of air bubbles out of the coolant. And the power steering sounds pretty good. I do need to keep turning the wheel back and forth, but overall it's looking good. Now that it's warmed up a little bit, you can see our AFRs are looking decent. I think once I drive around a bit, that will improve and kind of stay more consistent at 14.75, but I mean, it's pretty good. Oil pressure looks good. Yeah, honestly, it seems to be running pretty damn good. I mean, I wouldn't really expect it to be running bad. I haven't done anything to the engine since we pulled it, so yeah, let's make sure that it goes into all of the gears, especially since we had that whole clutch fiasco. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you know it, we got 6 now. Let's see if we go into reverse. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, look at our idle. Perfect. It's definitely some very old gas in this thing right now, so I'm definitely looking forward to running this tank out and or as low as I can get it, and then putting some fresh fuel in, because I think that will also improve everything, because it's been sitting for way too long. It sounds super good too. Well, I'm gonna let the coolant bleed, and I'm gonna keep burping the power steering. I'm not gonna bore you guys with those details, so I'm going to wrap this video here. Really appreciate you guys watching. Please hit that thumbs up if you got something out of this and you want to see more, and think about subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. In the next one, we will be hopefully taking this on its first test drive since the swap. Wheels and tires should be here, and we'll get the rest of the suspension components buttoned up, like our Cusco strut bars right there. I'm just kind of waiting to put those on, but yeah, we'll get all that sorted out in the next video. So all that's left after this is just wheels and tires, alignment, and ride height, and then we got to button some of the interior components back up into the inside of the car, and then we can drive it. So really looking forward to that. Anyways, thanks again for watching, and until next time, peace out everyone.